Vision Radio 345 in conversation.
On today's podcast, I'll be talking to Keith Thomas from the youth offending team. Good afternoon, Keith. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Eden?
I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you.
Right.
So, Keith, just give us tell us about your background and how long you've been working with the youth offending team for, and what does the organisation do? Just a brief summary.
Okay. In terms of my background, I've been working with young people for about 20, 23 years now, 24 years. Initially came from another field of work. I used to work in electronics. Funny enough, that was
Oh,
the first.
coming from the same trade.
Yeah, my first love, really. I had a passion for electronics.
Hmm.
Um, But at a younger age, I suppose a lot of people I used to sit with and talk with, they used to say to me, "You should be working with people. You should be working with people."
Hmm.
So, you know, after probably second, third occasion of being made redundant,
Hmm.
I thought, you know what? Let me check this thing out. Let me check out this working with people. And I remember I signed up to a counselling course.
Right.
Um, and there's about 30 odd people in the room, and the tutor started to talk, and I was listening, and I said, I know this. It was familiar to me.
Right.
I understood it. And so from there, I had, whilst I was doing this course, I had one of the assignments was to face a prejudice, and one of my prejudices was the police.
Right.
My dislike for the police
Right.
based on my earlier experiences, and probably experiences at the time. And so I said, okay, let me rise to the challenge. So I went down to a local police station,
Hmm.
and I approached the front desk, and I spoke to an officer and said, I've got an assignment to complete, and it's to confront my prejudice, and my prejudice is it's you, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did it that way, and the officer agreed to talk to me. So we spoke for over an hour. Just he told me about his experiences.
Hmm.
I told him about mine, and that was the first time I'd actually sat down with a police officer and just kind of like, in effect, break bread and
Mm.
and just shared experiences. And it was the first time I perhaps saw the human side of the police. And you know, after that, I saw probably about 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks after, I saw an ad.
Hmm.
Don't know if it's in a local newspaper, for appropriate adults. Um, and I thought that looks interesting. So I was working with young people in custody. Young people have been arrested,
Right.
going into custody. It was about 4 months of training. I said, yeah, that looks interesting. Based on the experience I just had
Right.
recently with
So you kind of saw a gap that you thought,
yeah, yeah.
I know this.
Yeah. So I did it. I did the training, um, and then I started working in the police station. So on call, I was on a rota, meeting with young people.
Hmm.
You know, getting some kind of connection, but feeling like I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more. So the the woman that was managing me at the time,
Hmm.
she got to a stage where she decided to move on from the charity that I was volunteering for. And we'd had conversations, and pretty much into the second year of the course.
Hmm.
Didn't really want to go on to the second year just because I was moving from one field to another,
Right.
and I need to get paid. Family, I had family, so
Of course.
um, I was a bit. I had reservations, but I did so well in the first year. It was the tutors that they insisted I do the second year, so I said okay. But what it was, this woman that was leaving said, "You know what? I'm leaving, and do you want a job?" No, actually, it didn't work that way. After 8 weeks into the course, I said, "You know what? I have to I have to leave. I
Hmm.
have to. I'll get there, but I have to take a different route." Is what
Wow.
I said to the tutors,
Yeah.
and what I said to the rest of the group. And so, it was like, okay, sorry to see you go, but okay, do your thing. After a week, it was a week later that she called me and said, Keith, do you want a job?
Wow.
I didn't respond. She said, you ain't got no choice, you have a job. And that's why, and that was in youth justice.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how the reason why I'm working with young people today.
Wow.
Just from that one conversation,
Wow.
that one telephone call,
Wow.
you know.
Great. Um, so moving forward now,
Yeah,
now you're here years down the
yeah,
line
yeah,
with a
yeah,
wealth of experience.
yeah.
I've known you for so many years, Keith, and the guys you work with at the yacht, and we've worked in so many projects. I mean, I remember we used to work in the park when we had some information about young people at the time who were causing disturbances around the borough, and how we worked together as a team and prevented a lot of things happening in that park.
That's
All
right.
the years we've been working there, and I really thank God that the fact that we never had no fatalities
Yeah,
because the information that we had, the team that we had, and it was brilliant, and
yeah,
I enjoyed every moment working with you and the rest of the guys. Brilliant, and in fact, they've started the events again, but they're in small pockets,
yeah, yeah.
which is nice. But we don't have it on that level that we used to have it before. But yeah, I'm coming back to the to you now and what you're doing. So uh, now you've been working with these young people for so long, and you've got that experience. Could you just tell me at what point do the young people get referred to the yacht?
It's usually when they've committed an offence, basically. So, young person gets arrested for, depending on the gravity of the offence,
Hmm.
meaning how serious it is. That means they've come to the attention of the system, they've come to the attention of the police. They're under 18, and they, if you like, the system, the powers that be, see the youth offending team as a vehicle for supporting young
Mm.
people, to
Hmm.
probably redirecting them, diverting them away from crime, but redirecting them, just being giving them positive support.
Yeah.
So that's what it's about. So as long as they have some contact with the police, then that's why they'll be referred to us. There is another side where there are concerns about young people. Maybe they've not been arrested, but maybe associations.
Right.
So some of their peers have been arrested or have known to be involved in criminal activity. Then they could be put forward for what we call voluntary support.
Okay.
In that sense, where you've got emerging concerns, you say, okay, let's see if we can do something. That whole thing, prevention's better than
Yeah,
better than cure.
and that's important that the intervention gets done early because that there at that moment could just save that young person's life in terms of the direction he's going down. And to touch on with that as well, obviously, you work with the families or alongside the families and so forth and so on. So tell us a
Right.
bit about that. How does that?
Wow.
I,
That.
I don't want to go into details
Yeah,
or
yeah,
calling
yeah,
names, but just
yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that the infrastructure when you work
yeah,
with that
yeah,
young person.
yeah. The reason why I say wow, because that's probably where you see the main, I think, frustrations.
Mm,
You're a parent, I'm a parent. It's look at it on that level, whereby, you've got parents who are trying to do their best, and
hmm.
not knowing how to deal with this adolescent, this teenager, this
Yeah.
young person who's in their home, who's thinking independently, making choices independently, and
Mm,
these choices don't line up with the things that they've been taught. And so I use the term frustration because usually when, especially for young people that what I'd consider to be entrenched in
hmm.
offending, it's really difficult for those parents because it's like they don't know if they feel like they've tried everything. You
Mm,
understand?
hmm.
And so I see a lot of that, a lot of disillusionment, a lot of frustration, a lot of help, a sense of helplessness
Yeah.
amongst families because not knowing what to do. Whereby also if their child, their son, their daughter, as what they may consider or believe to be some needs, some unmet needs.
Hmm.
That's also a source of their frustration because they may have gone through the whole of education
Yeah.
and not received the support that they may have required during that period. So it's with me in terms of families, and I've said this for the the time that I've been working with families is that you see a lot of that. It's a sense of
Yeah.
helplessness.
Likewise, and I've seen that myself talking to families in the school
Yeah.
which I work in. I see them come in and I spoke to them on the phone. And sometimes I have to say to them, you know what? You may have to sit down and think of other ways than what you haven't done before, because
Right.
obviously what you're doing is not working, and that needs support. We need input. We need different strategies to work, or they need different strategies to work with that particular young person or their own. Because some of them, as some of them go home, mum's gone shopping, or dad's not out from homework, not from work yet, and they're left to their own devices. So they've got to kind of upskill themselves, so to speak. And it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult, and I get that. But these are the foundations that we've always talked about, and this is
Right.
why it's good to have these healthy conversations.
Yeah.
I call them healthy conversations because only the best can come out of a healthy
Yeah.
conversation, and it sparks ideas. Because some people are so frustrated and confused, as you know, and you give them an idea, and that lights them up. And think, okay, I'll try that. But again, everybody's situation is different. Some are more complex than others,
Mm.
and that's what we have to kind of go through that process. But yeah, I think definitely that is the way
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. In terms of what you said something there in regards to you know finding new ways,
Hmm.
um, and it is about you know becoming more aware. What is life like? What is the world like for your child
Hmm.
at that period? We make that transition
Hmm.
from primary to secondary, and we know that it's a period of time when there's change.
Yeah, yeah,
The change. For us, where it's almost like we're stepping into the world when
yeah,
we step into
yeah.
a
And
secondary
some
school.
parents ain't even ready for it. They
Yeah,
think, oh my gosh, but you wasn't like that before. So how come you like this
exactly,
now? But
exactly.
they wasn't ready. They didn't have the tools, so to
Yeah,
speak.
it could be
And,
again. It's so. I see it as it's complex, but it's also for me, an important thing is to remember your own journey. I'm
yeah,
speaking things from a point where I remember my own journey and the
yeah,
journey of the
yeah,
people around me. So then, in terms of dealing with the young people, yeah, I get we've been on the same journey in the sense of that transition period
yes.
and what it was like stepping
Hmm.
into this world where you're looking at year what we call year 10s and year 11s, and they look like adults because
Mm.
bearded and big, and it's like, oh, done, and you come in as a child
Mm.
basically. And so, and then that needing to that the desire to be accepted,
Yeah,
that into a group, trying to find your identity, all these different things that you know you start to experience in this transitional period.
hmm,
It's really it's what makes this the whole thing. It's not, for me, there's no one solution to it. And you know using another term in regards to what I said earlier on about yeah, prevention is better than cure.
hmm,
It's also about, it takes a village. It does take a village. And I can give you information as a parent, and it's about how you relate, how you communicate.
yeah,
You know, remembering your own journey, having more patience. And I always look at it. I'm raising an adult here.
that's right. Yeah,
It's not like you're not always going to be a child. It's like I'm trying to socialize you. I'm trying to help you to interact with the world
hmm,
beyond this space.
yeah,
You're gonna be an adult, and as an adult, we're not. I suppose the world is not as patient
hmm.
and not as forgiving
And we see that.
as we would
Yeah,
be in children and young people
yeah,
services. Do you understand? So, you know, I feel like a responsibility to let young people know and parents know that as well, that these things, it's important. It's important to sit down and communicate with your child.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of things we learn through experience as well. You
yeah.
don't, there are books, you know, but the experience is
Is life
completely
experience is
different.
different.
It's
Exactly,
completely different, and
exactly.
the emotional aspects of it. So, families, ooh, yeah, and I see that across the services. That's the challenge, because it's the emotional,
Yeah,
um,
and the things that come with it,
yeah,
well
yeah,
attached to
it's
it as
the
well.
emotional impact of all of that, and it's
Mm.
you, yeah, you know, because people go, you know, parents themselves are going through things. They may have been through we call trauma
Yeah.
themselves when they were children. They're doing life, you know, trying to pay bills.
Mm.
You know, they've got relationships that
Hmm.
may be working, may not be working out.
Hmm.
They've got their own
All these
dreams
things
and all
contribute to.
and yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, you know, the the thing about time and giving time to your child, when I look at some of the just thinking of scenarios and examples across the years whereby when things change is when a parent wasn't available,
Mm.
not because they were doing anything wrong. They were out at work.
Yeah.
You know, they thought their child was okay,
Yeah.
but then that gave their child an opportunity to um, perhaps mix with someone that's not being supervised, that may be already involved in
Yeah.
not necessarily criminal behavior, but antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Because
saying?
it starts off with that first, the
Yeah, yeah,
antisocial behavior. And that's been going on for years. You know, kids will always be on the corner making a bit of
yeah,
noise,
yeah,
but they're not actually
yeah.
involved in the thing. But yeah,
Exactly. But it's that thing about supervision. Who's supervising your child?
supervising. Yeah.
Who's influencing your child? You know, who's directing your child when you're not present? And that's what I'm saying. It's the village mentality whereby, you know, when we were younger, um, for us, I suppose the adults that were out in the community were our parents.
I've got to, I've got to say this. They were remarkable because when I tell these young people about there was no phone and they still knew where we was,
Yeah, yeah,
that is something that they can't comprehend because they're asking me, how did they know? I said, well, this is what we're talking about, you see. That time, the village was running.
yeah, yeah,
And to touch on that point you said, the village ain't running no more because everybody's in their own house, minding their own business. Nobody wants to say nothing. So, from my perspective of how I see things, the village is kind of like closed down. Nobody's talking about what's going on because they're afraid that they'll be saying something and then something may occur or there may be a backlash. So that's a kind of angle I kind of take, and I get it. We know that saying, you know, it takes a village to raise up a child, but as it stands now, if you go to somebody and say to them, "Well, what happened so and so?" No one don't want to say nothing, and I think that's part of the problem because everybody's in fear of the consequence of what will happen. And I've heard many stories of when people are, you know, they've gone forward and then a day or 2 days later, the house get ransacked or
yeah,
somebody passes by and throws bottles or
yeah.
some kind of. So we've got to go back to that. We're going to wind this. We're going to keep going back and going back to where we usually talk
Right,
about, which is
right,
the foundation.
right,
And now
right.
we start there. I mean, I've got so many questions to ask you, but I can't even go through them because it's going to take me at least an hour.
Yeah, yeah. It's
You
a
know,
it's a process,
it's a
and
definitely
so
a
we
process.
have to trust the process, and you
Absolutely.
know
And I think, you know, with those things said, I mean, this is where we have to go back to, and we have to go back to that and getting people to understand that it is important that your child is my child,
yeah, 100%,
you know, and all our children are out there, and
hundred
this is
percent.
this is the generation, and we are part of that, us alongside them. And to be honest with you, this is what they actually need. They're screaming for this.
Yeah, yeah,
They're screaming for somebody to say, you know, let's get hold of this and let's get this thing moving. But we've got to get them to be the young people to drive our thoughts into them and say, well, look, like you just you know, like we had a little conversation
yeah, yeah,
before we started.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I'm going to touch on something else because this is something that's, you know, I run with it with my heart, and I suppose you do. The the violence,
Right.
the violence and the stabbings and the desensitized, mindless behavior of, I'm going to be straight, the young people.
Right.
We heard yesterday a 12-year-old got stabbed um, in Newham,
Right.
and I haven't heard anything else from the press. They haven't released nothing. 12 years of age. Now, I'm in the school, and I will tell you from the school's perspective, I sit down in a place was what they call the IAU isolation unit when kids get taken out and they get taken out of lessons because they're disturbing the lessons.
Right.
Some of them are year 7, year 8, year 9. You hear some of these young people at this age having these conversations, mine I shank you, mine I do this, and I'm sitting there watching, I'm thinking to myself, would you really do that or you're just saying that? This just confirms to me exactly what I was not thinking they wouldn't do.
Right.
Now, again, this is a huge, huge problem. We've talked about this for so many years. In the schools, I'm not too sure how that's going to work because we're there as mentors and we're there, as a pastoral team. We work with the young people and we have those little conversations with them. But again, we have to take this back to the home because that's where it all starts from. So, what's your views on that situation?
Wow, I think for me, it's not one thing. It's not one thing. There's too many different things, and and my colleagues, we sit and we have conversations with young people about this, and for me, you this thing about fear
Mm,
and what fear leads to.
yeah,
Fear within one's own self, within your mind. You know, and I mean you're you're worried about something that might happen, that could happen,
yes, yes,
and we see a lot of fear in our communities. As a parent, I can say, having a child as children at a certain age where a son, a daughter, and working in the system, you'd be fearful of what could happen to them
yeah,
if they get caught up with the wrong company, if they're making the wrong choices.
mm,
But that fear is natural for a parent. If I say to my child, be home for 4 o'clock, I know how far away school is and how long it takes to travel,
yeah.
and it's 10 past 4, I'm going to get anxious
Of course,
because
absolutely.
that's part of being a parent. But to get back to what you're saying, in just when I say fear, young people carry weapons because they are fearful. It's for protection for the majority.
Yeah, yeah,
In terms
yeah.
of what they feed back to us
Hmm.
and what they've fed back over the years, it's for protection. People, always, especially when it comes via the media, there's always some reference made to young person was in a gang, wasn't in a gang. It's like the point of reference whereby
Yeah,
the majority, sorry, the majority of young people that I see and we've seen, it's not the case. It's got nothing to do with their involvement with, uh, a so-called gang or group that are involved in offending.
it's just there's a possibility that something could happen, and they're willing to defend
They've,
themselves
they've, they've,
out of
they've,
fear.
they've a situation may have arisen and they're looking at how to defend themselves,
Mm, hmm.
because they're afraid that they don't want to be another stat, whereby, they see, uh, they may watch the news, they've got friends, they've got siblings,
Yeah,
they know what happens to who in the community. And
mm,
so they don't want to be the next victim. This thing about how they perceive a victim, victims considered as somebody as weak. So we see a lot of our young men, especially, who are so insecure, and because they have to present this front
yeah,
to,
yeah.
and it's
Wow.
almost like to it's almost like like a shield. It's a way of sending out a message that I'm not a victim, I'm not weak.
Mm,
So if you don't think that you can step to me and get away with it, I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna react. I'm gonna represent.
and I think that's because they haven't got anything else to put in place, and I think that's where people like yourself and people like-minded people like us who's working with young people, especially the young boys,
Right.
is to have that space. What's missing? Because I deal with, as I said, I deal with some of them in the school, and I say to them, how can you go from 0 to 100 in a split second? So within that time, there's actually no reasoning.
Right.
But then, as we said, it's something that has to be definitely worked on
Yeah.
in terms of giving them those skills to deal with conflict and how you deal with conflict. Because, like I said, some of these young people on the street, and I've said this to one of my students. I said, if a situation happens and it arises and you're in control of that situation, you'd be surprised what could happen. I'm not saying all situations are the same,
Right.
but the more you can minimize something, the better it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to say less. That's the kind of skill they're going to have to learn, but that has to be guided by
Yeah.
people who
I,
know how to assess
I,
situations and
Exactly, and I think it's again we'll go back to that term: prevention's better than cure,
Cure.
and it gets we talk about mindset and
Hmm.
what mindset do we create in our children?
Yeah.
So what mindset do you have at 2, 3, 4 in the formative years, in the early years? What
Right.
mindset has been what's been instilled in you?
Hmm.
And when we look at their examples, who are the role models for children? It's adults normally, or those that
Yeah.
are older than them at the end of the day. And if, we as adults resolve issues with violence,
Mm.
then, and then we're saying to children, you know, don't do that, you know, do as I say, not as I do.
That's the wrong
That,
move, isn't it?
this it's kind of
Yeah.
like you have to look at us as adults and how we resolve
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
You
Some
understand?
of us.
And exactly,
Mm.
and so, but in terms of their examples, different types of media, what's normalized, and
Yeah.
how they become desensitized.
Yes.
You know, as a, you said go back to the home as a
Mm.
man. How do you communicate with the mother of your child, your
Mm.
wife, when something and in front of your children?
And that's a very good point raised. And what I try to tell young people as well is that for me personally, the only time I will ever have any physical contact with anybody in that situation is if my life is in danger.
Yeah, yeah,
They're not looking at it that way. They're looking at it as no one's taking the mick.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And that's the issue. That's the issue there. And I'm trying to get to have that conversation with them, but as I said, it's something that we have to work on. Listen, Keith, I'm gonna have to I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to cut
yeah, yeah.
this one because there's so much to say.
Right.
It's lovely having you here, and definitely have to continue our conversations. And you can see I've got 2 pages full of questions to ask you. So I'm
No
definitely
problem.
gonna follow up with a second podcast with Keith Thomas from the youth offending team. And you're based in where?
Plaster.
Plaster.
Yeah.
Keith, lovely having you. I'm definitely going to get you back in there again. It's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure, definitely. And like you said, there is so much to talk about because we're talking about years and years of. So I'm talking about historically.
Yeah,
There are a number of things to address. So
absolutely.
it's not going to happen in 45 minutes or
Yeah.
an hour. It's work in progress.
Exactly,
So we have to
exactly.
trust that
And we live
process.
in hope. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
live in fear. We don't live in despair.
No,
We live
not
in
at all.
hope. And that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Keith.
To leave your comments or views about any of our podcast episodes, go to visionradio345@gmail.com.